Welcome to Beyond the Spectrum, every age, every need. I am Shawn Francis, and I am joined by my good friends, Susanna Peace Lavelle and Maurice McDavid. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to be talking to, not just today, but in ongoing conversations about how being a caregiver has affected your relationships with those you love, including yourself. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Spectrum. All right, let's jump right into it. So, for those of you who have supported our previous endeavor, Just Two Dads, thank you so very much. This is an extension of that in more ways than nine. My name is Shawn Francis. I am a husband, father, caregiver to a son who has autism and is 19 years of age, diagnosed at the age of 3. And he is one of 7 children that we have, 4 of which are my sister-in-law's children who we adopted a few years back. I work in financial services, and while serving business owners and the general public, also specialize in building a bridge between fellow special needs and caregiving families and financial service literacy and education. And I'm trying to make sure that I give the appropriate introduction to my co-hosts, because everything they do is just huge from professional and personal standpoint as far as caregivers go. Let's start with Susanna Peace Lavelle. Susanna is a mother, warrior, author, life coach for fellow special needs families, and 50 million other fantastic things that I can't all say at once. I will let her do that. Welcome, Susanna.
Hi, Shawn. So good to be with you. Hi, Maurice. I
Hello.
am so happy to be here. Thank you for that introduction. And yes, you are correct, Shawn. 50 million other things depending on the day. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe maybe twice on Sunday. I don't know.
There you
But
go.
I have been on this journey with as a extreme caregiving mother. It's the only type of caregiving I know. I am a single mama. I have a daughter who is also on the autism spectrum. She also has some other diagnoses and unique needs, including crazy food allergies, ADHD, generalized anxiety disorder. A lot of these things sometimes go hand in hand. She was
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed when she was 2.5 years old. And like your kiddo, she is now 19. And
Mm-hmm.
we are in the midst of the last year of public high school and considering what's next. So,
Mm-hmm.
so
There you
happy to
go.
be here. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And our next co-host is my friend, my cousin, my brother, my blood. Maurice McDavid is a father to a young man who's on the autism spectrum, also diagnosed, I believe, at 3, Isaac,
Correct. Correct.
and he works in sales and is just a tremendous asset to both his family and his community. Maurice, welcome, welcome, and thank you for being part of the ride and Beyond the Spectrum.
Yeah. I am super excited to be here. Really grateful for the opportunity. As Shawn said, Isaac is my youngest of 5. So I was a caregiver for many years, then I became a super caregiver when Isaac came along. But it's been an interesting, wonderful, difficult, beautiful journey. And I'm glad to be here and share that. And hopefully this is a space of encouragement for those of us who are caregivers.
There you go. And that's the whole purpose of the show and the movement that we're trying to build or build upon, which we started with Just Two Dads, which is that any excuse or opportunity that we have to remind people, generally speaking, that you're not alone and we have more in common than we do otherwise, especially at this time in the world and especially in our country here in the United States. That becomes very, very, very important. So I want to go back to, because we're talking about how being a caregiver has, affects your relationships with those you love, including yourself. You said something that I don't think you realize is very profound. You mentioned having multiple children, so as a result, you were a caregiver for years before you became what you referred to as a super caregiver upon Isaac's diagnosis. And I don't think we realize that, what the definition of caregiving is for many of us. From a cultural standpoint, there are many people that don't identify as caregivers when they are the epitome of just that, because they think I'm just being a parent. I'm just being a dutiful child if I'm helping care for an elderly parent or something like that. But we're all doing or giving some form of caregiving. Did you always realize that? Or was that something that came to you kind of after the fact? Because hosting a podcast is what got me to realizing that Laura and I were caregivers. I just thought we were parents.
Hmm. I don't think I realized that. I think that's become a phrase that I've attached meaning to over the last, I don't know how many years. Before I was just a dad, doing everything. Fortunately, unfortunately, beautifully, difficult with difficulty, we homeschooled all of our kids. So I was very involved in their education as far as on the sports side and the science and the math side. My wife did 99% of it, but I chipped in here and there. But it was a joyful thing for me. It was a passion. I loved the fact that I was so involved with my kids and who they were and how they were growing up and what their education was. So that was all amazing. And then, Isaac was added to the mix, and I guess I'll just stop. I don't really know when the transition happened in my mind, but right. I look at it now and all of it's caregiving. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're so busy just doing what you need to do, and it's about go time, and that's it. Susanna, when do you think that you? Well, I have a lesser question and a greater question, so to speak. Okay. The lesser question is, is there a line of demarcation for you where you think that took place? And then the greater question is, because once the line of demarcation does take place, I think it's then easier for you to recall how being a caregiver affected the first and most important relationship, which is with yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, so many things to respond to there, Shawn, and I definitely want to be able to, throughout the next hour or so, but I'll just start off with, sort of this very true and real fact for me in my lifetime. And that is, I had always dreamed of becoming a mother. It was the one wish that I had. I just felt it in my bones. Like, I am for sure going to be a mother. I, sort of fluctuated in my brain. Like, would I be a doctor? Would I be a bus driver? Would I be all of the things that we thought about? I wanted to be a police officer so I could yell at people and tell them what to do. So
you don't seem like the yell at people and tell them what to do type.
It's listen. At some point, it all needs to come out, Shawn. Okay.
So, I mean, the leadership, yeah, but not just to yell. You know what I mean? So, well, but I get what you mean.
The authoritative, you don't get to tell me what to do. I get to tell you what to do, kind of thing. Okay. So, anyway, so now we have a policeman, a bus driver, a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician. All of those things. Well, guess what? That is part of my journey as a mother. But I knew I always wanted to be a mother. I was like, even if I, for some reason, can't conceive myself, I will adopt. I just knew that it was going to be part of my life trajectory. And as well, I always thought I was going to have a lot of kiddos. So, I am noticing your stories where you have, your heart has to spread, right? And to, because you don't love any of your children less than the other, right? Your heart just expands to be able to love. And I grew up with 4 siblings, and, I come from a big family. And so I just thought, this is, I just thought my parents had it all figured out. It didn't seem hard to me what they were doing, it wasn't until I became a mother that I realized, wow, this is really hard. I mean, even just before any sort of diagnosis, right? This is really, really hard. And I will say that line of demarcation happened pretty early, because it turns out my daughter Arizona had so many food allergies. Like that was our first challenging, that was my first step into like a different kind of motherhood than what I
Mm-hmm.
had initially, visioned for myself. And so
Right.
I just thought, that first year of her life, she's covered head to toe in eczema. Like she was so uncomfortable. I mean, she was allergic to like 75 different things, like pages and pages of printouts from the allergist and all kinds of doctors. And I was like, okay, wow, this is a lot. This is another type of vigilance on top of just becoming a new mother to a newborn who needs you for everything. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's when I realized like, this is ooh-wee, I'm in for a ride. And I just thought, okay, so then I'm going to be the allergy mom. Got it. Right. I'll be the
Right.
allergy mom.
Right.
That'll be my, that'll be my, I don't know, badge of honor on my, I just thought that's what I'm going to be. And so, yeah, that was a rude awakening. And, as we know, as the years progressed, additional diagnoses continued to be added to the list. So I would
Right.
say it was pretty early on, just without the autism, without the ADHD, without any of that other stuff, the knowing of that, raising a child with a neurodivergent brain, I just
Mm-hmm.
knew that it was, so important for me to just be alert, awake. Every single thing in my life changed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, in thinking about, and I'm going to move on to the relationship with how it affects the relationship with spouses, but in terms of, because you mentioned a child with a neurodivergent brain, what that made me think of right away is still sticking with the topic of how it affects your relationship with yourself. Have either of you had any suspicion that there's any portion of you that is neurodivergent after observing habits, behaviors, and things like that, and the diagnosis itself? I'll save that, more detail for another episode, but I think I'm sure that I've recently gotten confirmation through a diagnosis that I too am neurodivergent. And so how it affects the answer to the question, if you were to ask me how it affects my relationship with myself, is like, I can tell you some, but then I'll have to get back to you because it's changing by the second. So have either of you thought of that with regard to yourselves?
I can't say that I think that's been my reality. The one piece that I'll say sometimes occurs to me is I cannot sit still for very long. Like I can't sit at a desk. I got to get up and I got to go outside. So I'm in and out of my office a lot in the day. And if I have a conference coming up next week, and I dread those because sitting at a table for all day, while people are talking and presenting, I start losing my mind. So I don't know if that's an ADD thing. I don't know if that's anything at all, but it's just who I've been.
It is, though. It is. And I'll tell you what it is. What it is an example of how we benefit from being more childlike and less childish. And what I mean by that, which I use that term often, is keeping the curiosity and the consciousness quotient very high, because you wouldn't know that about yourself were you not self-aware. And the benefit of that for all of us, just as part of the human experience, is that if you ask more questions and make less statements, not only do you learn more, but you learn more things about yourself. And then as a result of that, that gives you so much more capability of giving empathy to other people. So without a diagnosis, that, there's benefit in that. And then two, the other thing is, I think that we all consist of, there's no hard stop. So-and-so has such and such, and that's the end of that. There's spectrums and pieces of things. So I'm also of the mind, and I'm a little biased in this, even prior to my own diagnosis, where I think that many of us have little sprinkles of different things that are spectrum-ish, just generally speaking, even if there isn't a formal diagnosis. That's my thought.
Yeah, I think also to answer your question, I think that we all have, different brains for certain. I think there's a spectrum of what is considered, neurotypical and not. I will also offer, though, that what was very glaringly obvious to me was, our different temperaments that we come into this
Mm-hmm.
world with, right? Because
Mhm.
that's a consideration as well. There are all kind, I don't know if you're familiar with, like, orchid children and dandelion children, right? Like,
Mm-mm.
I wish I remember her name. She was so spectacular. I went to a help group summit recently, and this beautiful, brilliant doctor wrote this book, and she was just talking about how we're all born with different temperaments. So you have, like, the orchid children who need so much attention and light and care, and right, you drop an ice cube in once a week, and sometimes the orchid is okay, sometimes it's not. It's like so hard to I personally can never, like, take care of an orchid properly. And then
Mm-hmm.
there are those dandelion children, right, who can, grow and thrive through the cracks of a sidewalk, and they find
Mm-hmm.
ways to spread across. So I feel like I was like a dandelion, growing up. I was very
Mm.
amenable. Like, I had big feelings about things, but I was a very, like, adaptable, flexible. I just got along with everybody. I just made friends easily, that kind of thing. So I had to take that into consideration before, Arizona's diagnoses, because to me, she just seemed stubborn. Before I knew what was going on, I was like, why aren't you listening to me? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't you
Mhm.
responding when I'm calling your name? I really felt like, are you just a stubborn, obstinate kid? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know, right? So I think
Right.
that was what struck me first, in terms of, like, oh, I guess we're just a little bit different. And so now let me figure out how to raise this child, which is seemingly the opposite of who I am.
Right. 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 Wow. Um, talk, if you will, if you both will. Well, let's shift to the relationship with the next important thing other than ourselves is our spouses. Um, and in that regard, let's start with, um, for lack of a better term, division of responsibility or strength versus weaknesses. I know Laura and I never had a conscious conversation about, okay, I'm strong in this area and this area and this area, so I'll handle that. I'm not as strong in this, and this where you are, so you handle that. Ready? Go. I'd love to say that it was that strategic, but no, that was not the case. Which is kind of a good thing because we kind of just gravitated to what our strengths are. And if I said that, and while as a whole, it's brought us closer together, I'd be lying if I said that it didn't challenge our marriage, because that's not realistic. I mean, that's what that is going to do. So would you say the same is true for each of you? Maurice, I know that you and Florence are still married. You've
Mhm.
talked about how you feel like the diagnosis has saved your marriage. And Susanna, you are a single mom. So if you each will talk about that dynamic and what your experience has been like in that regard.
Do you want to go first, Susanna, or shall I?
I want you to go first,
Okay.
because because I feel like we all have different perspectives, right? But I
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
I offer, another one, in that I used to have a spouse. So I want to talk
Mhm.
about that,
Mhm.
as well as, I haven't always been in this journey by myself.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'll say for me, I apologize, but when I jump back, I just want to 100% agree with the temperaments. I have 5 kids and they're very unique. And my first and second daughters were polar opposites and they are neurotypical, but they were so different to deal with. My first daughter was a grinder. She's still a grinder. She hammered from the time she came out of the womb for what she wanted, and it was going to be her way or it was going to be a war. And then my second one came out sweet and slept all the time and just smiled. And it was like, well, it made me think, what's wrong with my first daughter? Because this one is perfection. So anyway, there are temperaments out there. So absolutely. When it comes to my marriage, Shawn, you kind of talked about responsibilities. I think we discovered there are certain things I don't like doing, and so that would kind of fall. I hate doing, and there are certain things my wife hates doing, and so it kind of fell to the other one to not have to do the things that we were just really didn't want to do, and that seemed to allow us to cover the things that needed to get done. As far as like, well, I don't know about all marriages, but my marriage, there have been times where it was just like, okay, you go your way and I'll go mine. It's just the battle of personalities, and there were times when we, it was like, I think we should probably not continue down this path. But we both passionately love our kids. And then with Isaac's diagnosis, it was like, that was just a piece that it felt like it was too big for one person. And I commend you, Susanna, for doing it. I know I don't know to what degree your partner's been involved, but that is just a mountain that I didn't see either of us being able to climb effectively. And so it kind of kept pushing us both to keep working on the relationship, keep staying in the commitment to the relationship. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for what I've learned. I've said a million times in front of Shawn that I was really quite a self-focused, selfish individual in my young adulthood. And then becoming a dad and then becoming Isaac's dad really taught me the value of service and selflessness and delayed gratification, and many of those things that are kind of hard for a selfish person to accept. But I had my aunt tell my wife a couple of years ago, he really is different. She remembered who I was. He really is different from who he was when he was young. And she goes, and I think that's all about you, my wife Florence, and being a dad. So yeah, I'll give them all the credit.
Well, you should also acknowledging yourself, Maurice, really, because we have choices. We can decide to, swim upstream or not, right? I just feel like you for sure had that openness and willingness. And, I actually acknowledge you both, because it is a marathon, right? Not a sprint, this lifetime together. And I though I am divorced, I do have parents who have been married for 54 years, right? And so I see they have a very loving relationship, very committed. And there have been so many ups and downs along the way, of course, because life, right? And now as they're getting older and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. I think that you just given me something that I never really stopped to think about. Also, again, this is the whole purpose for the show and the movement we're looking to expand on, which is that we learn from each other and we, in some way, shape, or form, make the world a better place. Which is that I want to commend you as well, because, and you can respond to this with as much depth or shallowness or not at all as you want to, but I don't know what straw broke the camel's back in your marriage, so to speak, but people don't stop to think that just as much courage and strength, the amount of courage and strength that it takes to sustain a marriage, when you are parents to a caregiving child, it takes a certain amount of that to also accept that parting is the best thing. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do either, unless there's some really horrendous situation that is taking place between those in the marriage. As a matter of fact, especially if there isn't a tremendous, horrendous situation in terms of abuse or anything like that that's taking place, if you have this basic loving relationship and you care about each other, it makes it easier to go on together longer than perhaps one should. And so it says a lot about making that choice also, especially if you honestly think that that is what's best for your child at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually want to clarify something and apologize actually, because I was saying before I had to do it alone earlier, and I don't do it alone, right? My ex-husband and I divorced when Arizona was around 8 years old. So that was 11 years ago. And without his support, my life would look very differently, right?
Right.
What I mean by sort of single motherhood is the day to day, right? So
Yeah.
sort of she lives with me full time, right? So
Right.
the food stuff, right? Because of all her allergies, right? Just getting up, organizing her routine, her schedule, her therapists, right?
Right.
3 a.m. I have a fever, I can't, right? So all of that feels very much like I'm a solo warrior sometimes, and most of the
Yeah.
time. And I say that in very loving and respectful tone and energy toward my ex-husband, who works really, really hard. Right? We just
I'm
right.
glad you said that too. Yeah, that's good because
I
there
feel like
are.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say, because I'm a single mother, but I'm not a single supporting mother. Do you know what I'm
There
saying?
you go. There you go. And that goes back to, that's kind of why we created our men's group, the Den, which we'll talk about at the end of the show as well, which is, a support group for men who are dads and or caregivers, because there are those people, both men and women, who are single parents in the truest sense, in that they take on everything because the other a spouse or parent is completely absent. Not your case,
That's
but
right.
still, when you're talking about day to day and who has primary custody and everything, two things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
In that you acknowledge what Susanna's what Arizona's dad does in terms of both, and contributes in terms of, as a parent and everything, and at the same time what it's like to have her with you primarily and do those things on a day-to-day basis. So definitely, most definitely.
Yeah, I mean, let me commend you, because there are times when you really need respite, right? I need a break from this, and as because I have a wife, I can say, you know what, I got to go for a walk, because my son sometimes is incessantly making noises or whatever it is, and it's just I've gotten to this point, and I'm like, okay, I got to go for a walk, and that opportunity to kind of just unplug from the caregiving for whatever space of time is incredibly valuable to me. And that's not, I don't imagine that's your scenario. No, she's 18, 19 now. So maybe it's not like it was, but yeah, that's a heavy load. I mean, we all carry it, loving our kids, and it's not, it's not a negative, it's not a burden, it's all that. But there are realities to the draw that it takes from your mind, from your body, from your spirit. And so doing that on your own, let me commend you. That's hard work. Good work, but
most
hard.
definitely. Yeah. How do you think being a caregiver has affected your relationships with others? That means the friends that you've gained that you wouldn't have were it not for the diagnosis, as well as maybe those that you've lost, and then those family members that you have to love with a little bit of a Heisman Trophy pose and just kind of push them off a little bit.
We call that loving from afar, Shawn.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yes. Yeah. Talk about each of those, if you guys will.
My cat just.
I was just going to say, for those that have,
for
those
I saw the door mysteriously swing open.
Yes, for those.
I hope that's a pet.
Speaking of those who have passed.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, no, really.
It's either a pet or it's paranormal.
Right. It could be
both.
both.
Could be both.
Right.
Yeah, relationships with others, man, I will say that, as someone, in her 50s, right? I have lived some time on this earth, and I have girlfriends and friends and folks that I call my tribe, right? They've surrounded me with love and care and attention and support for Arizona. But, things, shift and change in all of our lives. And so I have found that my relationship with others, whether they are colleagues or, mates on the tennis court, or, you know, moms at the school where Arizona goes. I just feel like I have had this beautiful like opportunity to just be so conscious about who and where and how I want to spend my time. Who with,
Mm-hmm.
how much time am I going to answer that phone call that I know is probably going to be just a gossip session, or someone just needing to vent for 45 minutes, but I just can't hold that right now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like my relationships have been so much more intentional. It's a beautiful thing. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think that has been one of the many blessings of being a parent to Arizona, one of the many, many gifts that I've been
Mm-hmm.
able to receive on this journey. And I'm so grateful for that.
Definitely. Definitely. I, it's interesting you say that because I'm trying to make this as short as I possibly can. And at the time of us recording this, we're freshly into the new year, right? Um, I have, through mentors that I've had personally, as well as those that I've acquired online through books and things like that. When everybody talks about putting together a plan for your year and making a business plan or a life plan, it starts with these big, huge, elaborate things. And one of them is a mentor that actually has one that begins with something that's very profound, which is writing your eulogy, and then you back engineer it to have put people in a position to say the things about you that you would hope they say because you've lived that life accordingly, right? And there's great value in that. But what I realized, partially through my diagnosis and then just my own self, is that those big things, those are just too many big moving parts. I can get all hot and bothered about putting it together. It's great. But sticking to a book or a plan that huge is difficult. So I adopted an idea from someone else that I saw talking about getting rid of any and everything that distracts you from the things that you're trying to accomplish. And for me, that's a lot. Like, just like, ooh, shiny object, squirrel. I just easily distracted. So when it talks about getting rid of those things, it started with clothes. So, and it shouldn't be some huge undertaking. It shouldn't take that long. But I realized how many clothes and things like that I just have, matter of fact, just put them out for donation. Just a lot of things and then I found some things that I wanted to hold on to, and I realized, if you look at me, my office is a an orderly mess, because I realize that I hold on to things a lot, and sometimes it's not just a matter of loving the things, but sometimes it's maybe fear, and it's a very much of a scarcity mindset. So I learned that thing about myself. And the same thing is true of not just the physical stuff. And this is the most difficult part, is the things that you're carrying. And if you are not a person who is weighted down and walking around like schlepp rock, for those that remember Flintstones, just a
That's a
negative
throwback.
person with a cloud over their head, just whoa, whoa. If you're not that negative, that much of an obviously negative person, you probably don't even realize how many things you're carrying in your emotional pockets that are heavy as hell and just really weighing you down. And some relationships need to be completely cut off. Some of them need to be loved from afar. But you have to stop and ask about that. And then it goes back again to the whole thing about raising your consciousness. So I've been emptying jars, literally and figuratively. I have a family member with whom there's some discord because they have some within themselves. And I realized that I needed to let them know that something they said had really, really bothered me, and just because I want them to know. And I had a conversation with my dad, and he said, you need to like let that go. And I realized that the reason I really wanted to let this person know is because I love them and that I was hurt. And I arrived at the conclusion that, you know what? I'm just going to let them know that I love them, and that's it. I'm not going to say anything else. And then within myself, I am going to actually let it go. That's not a difficult, I mean, that's not, I can't even speak right. That's not an easy thing. But not everything difficult is big and heavy and right in front of you too. There's things that have what I literally just thought of, that carry quiet weight as opposed to loud, heavy, boisterous weight. But some heavy things are very, very quiet. That's my ramble. Sorry.
We
I
love
think
your
caregiving just adds to that. So thank you. I think caregiving just adds to that, because the other thing is it's so covert,
Nice fill in the silence, Susanna. I love it.
What'd you say?
A long, beautiful way to fill the silence. That pregnant pause was just going longer and longer. Ooh.
Well, because my thought is also like, where did that land? It's like, man, it's either that was profound, or found what? What did he just say? But because I feel like I'm discovering myself, like, as we sit here, you know what I mean? And I think it's easy. I think it's easier to deal with things that are overtly heavy, things that overtly bring you down. A person who doesn't hold their head up, like myself. The areas where I lack confidence in life are not things that cause me to hold my head down. So therefore, they're a little more difficult to identify. And then as a result, when you add the whole caregiving aspect and you're just doing what you do, if you don't stop for a second to check in with yourself, you don't even realize what it is you do, how you do it, why, or who you are.
Well, I think I think a big part of the caregiving journey, which is very understandable, is that we go into this sort of go mode, warrior mode, rote behavior mode in terms of all of the things that need to be done. Not to say that we don't want to come back to our own feelings, and not to say that we want to live a numbed out life, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that sometimes in the moments, and many moments in my case, I mean, even just right now, I've had to mute myself a couple of times because Arizona has been slamming doors, right? And, the cats are screaming, right? And Arizona is, she makes a lot of noise. Like, that's just her thing. Luckily, we have a little back house, which is where she can rage to her K-pop, which I think is what she's doing right now. But I feel like, again, back to this sort of vigilance. Like, I feel like I'm always on, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm always ready to jump out of my chair or respond to something. Even if Arizona's in school, even if there's an activity that she's very, very much participating in, that she's happy to do, a preferred activity, like any given moment, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what you mean by the overt, like, in your face, have to respond,
And because of that, you don't notice the silent weight. And there's one of the guys in our group, the Den. I'm sorry, I cut you off too.
That's okay. Like, turns out I like to ramble also, Shawn. Give me space for that. Sheesh.
Well, one of the guys in our men's group, the Den, is he and his wife are they have an only child, an adult on the spectrum, and he told me that he has served in the military, and it was explained to him by a therapist that the level of PTSD that we carry as caregivers as a result of being on all the time is comparable to some wartime experiences. Now, again, I'm sure it probably relates to drips of pressure as opposed to just, a gallon, so to speak. But the one thing I want to say in my attempt to give you grace is the other thing being, so insular. Half of what you just talked about, with the exception of, for those of us, those that will see this episode versus just hear it, with the exception of that door in the background that opened and hearing the cat meow just a little, we didn't know that. We have no idea that Arizona is slamming any doors. You can't even hear that. And that's a microcosm of what it is usually for for us as caregivers, where we're just like, everybody sees this, everybody, even when you get to a point where you don't really care what other people think, inwardly, there's a whole lot of chaos because of all the stuff going on around you. outwardly there's that much of it that's seen unless there's some tremendous meltdown or something like that. And I think I might have told you before, I was in Costco with Elijah when he was, I don't know, he might have been 10 or something like that. No, he was younger than that because he was in the shopping cart. And he was having this massive meltdown. And even in that case, people weren't looking as much as I thought they were, you know, and it's never as bad on the outside. It's rarely as bad as on the outside as it seems or feels on the inside.
You know, I kind of want to jump in there because there is, for me, there is kind of always a weird pressure. Is Isaac gonna escalate, right? So
what if,
you know, so when you kind of talked about the PTSD, that we've had sessions where, you know, Isaac's had a meltdown, right? And that's in public or at home. And strangely enough, I sent to him, the whole family is like, oh, is this going to be one of those sessions where we can't bring him down, where he's just going to continue to cycle up and there's kind of nothing you can do about it. And that means that doors are going to start getting slammed and he's going to threaten to elope. He's going to, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. You know, and so we've had him multiple times go out the front door and I've had to walk behind him until he comes down. And that's typically at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're dog tired, and this is all going on. So we've all had that, yeah. And you know, I guess the reason it's fresh is like, I think it was yesterday or the day before, he started spinning up, and I know we were all like, oh no, and it's just, it's a trauma, and some of his siblings are like going in the room and closing their doors because they just want to cut off from it, right? And my wife and I are like trying to do this dance of how do we de-escalate. And fortunately, it didn't go to the heights that it can go. But it was, you know, I remember it was I guess it was night before the night. I was out that night. I was so kind of, when it was all done, I was finally able to go to sleep. It was so hard to get up in the morning because I was drained out from the stress of that. So
it's a different type of tired. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other piece that I was thinking about as you guys were talking is I don't like routine. I buck routine. It drives me crazy. I feel like I'm trapped if I got to do everything every day. And so having a child on autism and really having to restrict food in the house. And fortunately for us, I don't know if it's been forced because of the kind of parents we are. You know, a lot of autistic kids have very specific schedules they want to stick to. And maybe because of the person I am, my son just couldn't get that from me. So he's gotten much more flexible and not having to have things go on certain schedules. But having to try and work within those parameters that are good and healthy for him and help him to, you know, grow despite his autism has been incredibly challenging for me because that's not my personality. I'm in sales. I like to talk to people. I like to free form it and flow. And that's why I never wanted to clock in and clock out of anywhere because I feel trapped. So it's been a journey. And I think about the people who are listening to this and the parents and the caregivers. And I want to say it's okay to be who you are in this. You know, we all struggle from different perspectives. And I hope that these conversations that we have are encouragements, are reminders that it's okay to be who you are. You are far from perfect. You're not going to do it perfectly. None of us have, none of us will. I know the reason I'm on this podcast is I am just hoping that something I say or something we say will resonate with a listener and they'll have the energy to do another day, or they'll gain an insight that helps to make their life a little bit better, or I hadn't heard that before, and it'll cause them to investigate something that helps their child. So sorry if I went off on a tangent, but those are kind of just percolating as you guys were sharing. So
no, do it.
It's join the crowd, join the club. No, but I also feel like too, and then therefore, you know, someone out there listening, or it just, you know, I think about when we all first received diagnoses for our children way back in the day, you know, we all happen to have adults on the spectrum, legal adults, right? And at the same time, like I feel it in my bones, that original sort of deer in the headlight, like what's going to happen? What's next? I don't know. Right. There are so many different phases, chapters and seasons in this journey. And I, my quest as an advocate for disability families, as a coach, as an author, as a speaker, as a podcast co-host, is for anyone to just feel like just a little bit less alone. I feel that in this lifetime, we are all connected. We are all light beings connected to, others on this earth, those who have passed, non-human beings, right? Or animals and plants. And I just want, I want you all to know that you are not alone. It might feel like you are just alone, like I'm just on my own here in the middle of the night as my child is, fixated on potentially catching rabies from, a bat that she thinks might exist in our attic, but we don't have an attic. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that was like a 3-month period last year of just this perseveration around contracting rabies. I don't know where it came from. Do you know what I'm saying? And so it's just like, even hearing other children or other people saying "mommy" at the store, I literally like I have a physical reaction to that, because I jump out of my skin sometimes, and the reasoning for the screaming of the mommy, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
There's an ant near my plate, right? So it's just, whoo. I mean, again, I've learned how to, what I've learned how to do? I've learned how to press that mute button so quick, because I am often, on Zooms with clients, or giving a talk, or whatever, running a connection circle support group, and there is an outburst. But man, our body keeps the score, because it
does. Susanna, I want to touch on, and I know for those that are joining us for the first time, new to the new show, we'll be spending more time on the following topic, but I want you to speak to how you help families professionally. I want as many people as possible to know about your service and what you do, because you just talked about being able to, you give a experience-based service. In other words, it's like the hair club for men, Cy Sperling, whatever that guy's name. I'm not just a member of the. I'm not just the president. I'm also a member. You don't just give support, right? You use the techniques in your everyday life that you apply to families to help them life plan when it comes to caregiving and balancing it. Share with us how that works from a client perspective. I know each case is different, but some of the things that you do to help people cope with that on button that seems to be forever pressed.
Right. So first, my life is my work, and my work is my living. Everything is intertwined. I feel absolutely in alignment in terms of my purpose of, being of service to this beloved community in this lifetime as a human being on this earth. Okay. I'm so grateful every morning. I'm like, wow, I know what I'm here for. I really, really, really do. I feel that so deeply. And I also feel like I teach what I most need to learn. Like I haven't just, there's not in my brain, I haven't reached like success, right? I feel like there's no such thing, right? I haven't just reached this goal and then that's it. It's like you learn to brush your teeth and you're like, okay, cool. I brushed my teeth. That's it. Right. I'm done with brushing my teeth. I know for me, I got into this work very organically and naturally because, I was trying to figure out answers for and resources and support and guidance in any way I could for raising Arizona. And I realized that as I was advocating so much for her, I realized that I also needed to advocate for myself. And so it's been this beautiful parallel journey. I, felt so, like I said, like deer in the headlights back then. I find myself to be very tenacious. I have no problem. Sales, I got you, Maurice. Like I can knock on a door. I can get what I need to get. Like that's never been a problem, and yet, and still I feel very educated, I yet, and still I was met with like closed doors and no's. You know what I mean? Like, don't tell me no. I will find another way. And so I wanted to share all of that with anybody who could find that to be supportive. And it started, in the waiting rooms of the therapy centers where Arizona was getting her occupational therapy or speech therapy. And, there are other mothers there, or there are nannies or other caregivers. Sometimes there are grandparents there. And I just wanted to share, hey guys, did you know, right? And so that led to, doing it for a living. And that has branched out to so many different modalities in terms of coaching one-on-one, support groups, workshops, consulting with corporations, and co-hosting podcasts and writing and being a published author and all kinds of fun things. And I just know that from the inside out, I just always wanted to create. I wanted to create the things, and I'm still ever creating and ever becoming what I needed most back then, and what I needed most during, the next challenging season, or getting to, the first IEP or whatever it is. And I really feel like I work with, people and individuals who, are also seeking, something different within themselves, and not just in terms of them as the parent or the sibling or the coworker of the person who has some sort of, diagnosis or unique need. Right. So,
Right.
I mean, I honestly, I wake up every day in so much gratitude for just knowing, like, I think a lot of us, are seeking our whole lives for something to fill some kind of void. And I don't have that feeling. And
Exactly.
it's because of Arizona, though. It is absolutely, she is absolutely the impetus, her coming through me as my child, for me to have the opportunity to be so awakened during this lifetime, without question.
That brings, I don't know if this is going to be a question asked on every episode, but I'm thinking, I've thought of this before because Laura and I have talked about it, looking at Elijah. If he were all of a sudden, if he were neurotypical, just like overnight, what would that mean? So the question is, I'll go last. Let's each of us answer this, which is, where would you be, or what would life be like without autism? Because everything you just talked about, us being here, we wouldn't be here doing this. And I don't know if we would, outside of Maurice and I don't know if we would all know each other. I don't. And there's other people that you wouldn't necessarily know. Where would you be, and what would life be like without autism? For some people, they're going to hear this and just, depending on what they're carrying, they're just like, let me tell you how much better it would be. I wouldn't have that. And that's not to judge anybody, because we don't know what people are going through. But each of you, talk about that. What it would be like, what life would be like without it. Not without your child, just without the diagnosis.
Great question. Don't know I know how to answer it. I know there are things I see in my son. That's not really answering that question. God, man, that's. I don't even know if I want to answer that question, to tell you the truth, because my life is my life, and I am truly grateful for it. And yes, it's had its difficulties, it's had its beauties. my 22-year-old son still gives me kisses every day and still gives me hugs every day. And if he were neurotypical, I would not be getting that. So, and I love that when he comes up to me and he kisses the top of my bald head. And he just is very affectionate, and that would be gone because my 25-year-old son, he loves me, but I ain't getting no kisses from him, and he ain't kissing the top of my head. So,
Right.
I just think I don't want to answer that question because my life is my life. I'm really grateful for it. It's loaded with difficulties. It's loaded with beauty. I'm content. So,
But
I'm
you
not
did
gonna
answer it.
question, bro.
That you
Okay.
did. That is an answer. And for somebody listening, they might feel like, um, they would get kisses and affection if there was. They may feel it the other way around.
True.
You
Because
know
I
what I
know
mean?
that's very typical. Sometimes a lot of kids with an autism diagnosis are not affectionate, and
Exactly.
that may be. We didn't go the ABA route. We went the RDA, kind of relational development
Hmm.
therapy, as opposed to
Yeah.
ABA, and that was very much about connecting my son with the world emotionally, and
Right.
not some of the kind of the rote practices of ABA. So maybe that's a difference. I don't know, but
And I'm just saying that to say that there is no wrong answer, and you did answer it.
mm,
So
mm,
thank you.
okay,
Go ahead, Susanna.
sure.
Well, I am going to respond to that with a little snapshot of last night, sitting at the dinner table with Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to make me a little emotional. Okay. So just roll with me here. But she said to me, she said, Mama, I am so proud to be who I am. Okay. And she said, I'm going to be a role model to autistic girls. Okay. And we're not even talking about anything. She loves to look at videos of other kiddos who have disabilities, Down syndrome or a wheelchair user or whatever it is. And she just feels so like proud. And so I think no matter what type of children I would be given in this lifetime, and turns out I got this one, I think that's all that matters to me.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
mm,
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And I think I realized something here today. Mm. And I'm thankful to both of you for it. When Laura and I have asked the question, we've answered that question with a question, which is, would Elijah be the same? We've actually answered that with multiple questions. Would he be the same? It's obvious some of the things that we would gain with him being neurotypical, and some of it we would welcome. But the other question, which we'll never know the answer to, I shouldn't say never, we don't know the answer to, which is we don't know what we would lose.
Mhm.
What would we lose? You know? And everything you guys have just said here today, just lets that be known. And can you guys hear that at all?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear it. That's good.
Sounds
Okay.
familiar.
That's Elijah.
See what I
Yes, I
mean?
can hear him.
See what I
That's my
mean?
language. I understand that
Yep.
language.
Yeah, man.
And that's why
Right.
I'm thankful for the show, because if I was
Yeah.
on somebody else's podcast, I would
Yeah.
be, oh my gosh, he's making. And there's a couple of times I hit mute just like you did, but your answers there just had me like, I don't need that to be muted, and then it makes you stop within your own day. And then so now I'm thinking back to my own last night where I'm working on stuff. We were using a different provider for the recording of the podcast, and I was having so much technical difficulty last night, and I didn't rage, but I made that his problem, whereas I did go upstairs and I said, hey, bud, can you bring it down to an inside voice or whatever? because it was going for a long time, and that's him he's just happy and he's stimming. But wasn't that serious? In the moment it felt like it, but so what will we lose? Speaking of loss, what we've lost here is time, and what we've gained is an episode as it brings us to the end, and kind of has me at the beginning because I'm just so grateful all over again for this opportunity for each of you, to everyone within the sound of my voice. I want to thank you guys for being here today. The episodes going forth will consist of various combinations of the three of us and guests as well. And we want to thank our friends at Billy Footwear, makers of adaptable footwear for all. You click on the link in the show notes, you get a percentage, 10% off your final price. That includes any sale items that may be taking place. If you or someone you know is a male who is a dad or caregiver to someone with special needs, or a diagnosis, elderly, whatever the case might be, feel free to join our men's group, The Den. We meet bi-weekly on Zoom. The link will also be included in the show notes, and it is free of charge. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Susanna. And to everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you for joining us here on Beyond the Spectrum. And we'll see you next time. We love you.